We need to talk about The Substance because it has been a while since a movie left me thinking, what the hell did I just watch, as much as this one did. I was so stunned by this experience, I had to drive back home in silence. I normally listen to an audiobook or a podcast when I drive, but I needed to sit there and process. So this is the second feature film of the French writer-director Coralie Fargeat, and if you're a horror fan, you are probably familiar with her 2017 film Revenge. The Substance is a body horror fever dream. It's a darkly funny, grotesque, and twisted movie about an aging celebrity, Elizabeth Sparkle, played brilliantly by Demi Moore, who decides to use a black market drug to bring forward a better version of herself. But there's a catch. A balance needs to be maintained. 7 days for the original body, 7 days for the new one. No exceptions. The two are one. A simple rule, but we're watching a horror movie, so that means rules are there to be broken. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Elizabeth and her better self, Sue, will find out very soon. Where do I even begin with this? This movie is unhinged. Like, not to be dramatic, but this movie is disgusting, and I wish I could unsee some of it, which means it's a very effective body horror film. Dennis Quaid eating shrimp? Disgusting. Absolutely vile. He's already playing a very unpleasant, slimy executive. I'm sure it's no coincidence his name is Harvey, but just seeing a close-up of him consuming food, it's messy, it's an excessive amount of shrimp. He's talking about women essentially having an expiration date and how people always want something new and fresh as he is stuffing his face. So gross. The way Elizabeth produces her younger self, disgusting. Obviously Sue, that's the name of Margaret Qualley's character, has to come out somehow. I'm not going to describe the scene in detail, but it is very disturbing and you can experience that on your own. There's some really out there, grotesque body horror and gore later in the film that are absolutely insane, and the makeup and prosthetics deserve an Oscar immediately. The third act in particular was absolutely wild, too wild for my taste actually, but we'll get back to that later. And if you're like me and you don't like needles, good luck watching this film in general. I particularly don't like watching that moment of contact of the needle to the skin, and there is a lot of that in this movie. Injecting, stitching, spinal taps. I actually had to look away a few times. My point here is, if you're easily disturbed by any of this or gore in general, The Substance is going to be tough to handle at times. It is not for the faint of heart, but that comes with the subgenre, so you should know what you're getting yourself into. More importantly though, in the best traditions of the new French extremity, The Substance uses the horror and gore to grab the viewer's attention and turn it to the actual ideas behind all of this. The beauty standards, women's bodies, and the importance we as a society put on physical beauty. Now, I have seen quite a few reactions online of people saying this is some kind of radical takedown of patriarchal beauty standards, and while beauty standards are definitely the catalyst here, I think there is more to talk about than that. Plus, I just don't know how much you can call it a takedown when the movie constantly shows off every inch of Margaret Qualley's face and body from every angle, naked or clothed. And while that sexualization and the cult of youth are part of the point, they also become a part of the appeal. On top of that, while unrealistic beauty standards are bad is absolutely a valid take, it is also a pretty surface level one, and the movie deserves more credit than that. What I find more interesting here is how that manifests in self-inflicted pain, how much of this we do to ourselves, how it ties into the obsession with external validation, and how much of it comes from not realizing there is more to life than physical beauty and youth. The movie actually gets quite sad at times when you see that Elizabeth is incapable of loving and accepting herself. Not only does she hate her current self to the point of being unable to enjoy her life or go out and connect with someone because she is haunted by this supposedly better version of herself, but she also begins to resent that younger version, Sue, and Sue resents Elizabeth. There is definitely a conversation to be had about how at odds Elizabeth and Sue are, and how instead of taking care of each other, they just shove each other into a dark corner in shame and disgust. Sue has very little regard and respect for Elizabeth, but Elizabeth also has very little respect for herself. Really, she doesn't like either version of her. It's also interesting how, despite what it costs Elizabeth to keep up this younger self, she still chooses to continue with the experience. All of this is very sad and clearly an allegory for what women feel like they need to do in order to stay relevant and desirable. That relevance is a big part of the motivation here. Elizabeth is not ready to step away from her career and fade into irrelevance because she has nothing else in her life. She lives in this beautiful place. She clearly has money. She has been successful, but it's empty and she is alone. We never see her have any kind of meaningful relationship, no friends, family, or partner, no sense of internal value beyond what she can present to the world. So once she becomes irrelevant to the public, she will really have nothing left. All of this goes back to the importance we place on physical beauty. And while, yes, societal pressure is a part of it, the other part is the choices we make, what we ourselves focus on, and the kindness we need to have for ourselves and for others. Otherwise, we will go on feeling that we will never be enough and that our value as human beings really does have an expiration date, which is ridiculous. Beauty standards exist, but we make the choice whether or not we live our lives to validate them. Now, this movie is not subtle. All of its themes and ideas are right there in front of you, and it's not that complicated. The characters themselves aren't really that complicated either. And this is something I would normally have a problem with, but in this case, I actually think it mostly works. It's a body horror film. Bluntness usually comes with the territory, but it also makes sense with the visual style, the extreme close-ups, the exaggerated elements, the saturation and vibrancy of it all, the juxtaposition of Elizabeth and Sue. Nothing about this movie is subtle, and it will absolutely be too much and too blunt for some, but personally, I respect the commitment to the vision. Even if I think it went too far in the third act, the movie stands out and it is completely unforgettable. Something that's also unforgettable is Demi Moore's performance. The entire cast is great, and it's scary how good Dennis Quaid is at being nasty, but Demi Moore steals the show. It's easily her best performance in decades and one of the best roles of her entire career. She is raw and intense, but she's fueled by desperation, and through all of this, you understand the fear and loneliness her actions are coming from. I'm going to be honest, for the first two acts of this film, I thought this was going to be one of my top favorites of the year. Easily top 5 material, maybe even top 3. I was loving the stylistic choices, the way it confronted the audience, the visual cues and connections, how certain colors and lighting were a part of the storytelling. I was on board, but it did lose me a little bit in the third act, and particularly in the last 20 to 30 minutes. That section is out of control and getting into the absurd. It's so over the top, so grotesque and out there, and it just keeps going. It made the movie feel like it was overstaying its welcome. I think it went too far, which ended up hurting the overall effect, not just because of the extreme nature of what was happening, but also because it felt like some of it was inconsistent within the world of the movie itself. You have to suspend your disbelief for this entire film to work, obviously, but those last 30 minutes push the film even further into what feels like almost nightmare logic territory. But at the end of the day, I would rather see a movie go too far than not go far enough. If I were to describe The Substance through other media, I would say it's The Picture of Dorian Gray reimagined by David Cronenberg with a bit of Death Becomes Her. It's a wild mix of things, but it's also so uniquely the vision and intensity of Coralie Farja. It's shocking, it's crazy, it's uncomfortable how up close and personal it gets with the camera. It's violent, it's darkly funny, and it's definitely entertaining. It's one of the best horror films of the year. Even if the third act is a bit of an overkill, and even if the themes are about as subtle as Dennis Quaid eating that shrimp, it's a striking movie that's worth seeing and worth thinking about. The Substance is a film that people will either love or hate because it is impossible to remain neutral while watching it, but those strong reactions are part of the fun. It's a body horror film unlike anything I've seen before, and if there ever was a cautionary tale for going too far in pursuit of what you want, this is it. So just remember, the next time you reinvent the new you, you are one, and you can't escape from yourself.